B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, $2 billion flying wings with personality. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber is the most expensive aircraft ever made, and the B-2 is not only expensive to build, they cost a lot of money to operate too. But quite a lot of advantages after having this one B-2 bomber. The Air Force doesn't have enough B-2s. But there may be a more cost-effective alternative. Since its founding in 1947, the U.S. Air Force has invested heavily in operating long-range strategic bombers for nuclear deterrence. However, by the 1960s it was becoming increasingly clear that the high-flying B-52 bombers had a poor chance of surviving the Soviet Union's ever-expanding network of high-speed interceptors and surface-to-air missiles. The Air Force instead invested in the FB-111 and B-1 supersonic bombers designed to penetrate enemy airspace at low altitudes, where radar detection is more difficult. But Pentagon strategists knew that the Soviets were developing Doppler radar and airborne radar to cover the blind spot. At that time, however, U.S. aeronautical engineers realized that radar-absorbing materials and non-reflective surfaces could drastically reduce the aircraft's radar detection range. A feature that was applied to modest results in the Lockheed State Route 71 Blackbird spyplane. Lockheed's Have Blue prototype produced the first operational stealth aircraft, the F-117 Nighthawk attack aircraft. The Pentagon wants its next stealth aircraft, the Advanced Technology Bomber, to tackle the strategic nuclear strike role. By then Northrop had been testing at Area 51 in Nevada a strange-looking stealth demonstrator called Tacit Blue, also known as Whale, or Alien School Bus. Earlier in the late 1940s, the company had developed a giant 52-meter flying wing bomber called the YB-49. When Lockheed and Northrop competed in the ATB competition in 1981, Northrop's larger, tailless flying wing concept prevailed. The existence of the Gray project was made public, but further details remained top secret, with the Pentagon buying parts from confused subcontractors using dummy companies. Nonetheless, two B-2 engineers were arrested for industrial espionage in 1984 and 2005. Over the next 8 years, the bomber was expensively redesigned for low-altitude penetration, causing development costs to swell to $42 billion, generating political controversy. The Spirit was finally unveiled in 1988 and made its first flight the following year. But even before it started production in 1993, the Cold War abruptly ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, largely taking excuses for nuclear-armed superbombers with it. The Air Force still wants the B-2, but the expensive program is on the cutting block with other premium weapons like the Seawolf-class submarine. The Pentagon hastily placed renewed emphasis on developing the B-2's non-nuclear capabilities. After all, stealth bombers could theoretically reduce the number of escort aircraft needed in the early days of a conflict. In practice, Spirits are often accompanied by EA-6B Prowler aircraft to provide jamming and anti-radar support, just in case. Spirit procurement was first reduced to 75, then cut to 20 by the Bush administration in 1992. An additional B-2 prototype was converted to operational status under Clinton, for a total of 21. This caused the B-2's $500 million unit price to jump to $737 million, or $929 million including parts, upgrades, and technical support. With development taken into account, Spirit made $2.1 billion, by far the most expensive aircraft ever built. All but one test aircraft are serving today with the 509th Bomb Wing based at Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri, a unit derived from the group that dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan. Spirits are flown by an elite corps of about 80 pilots who frequently fly direct world missions from Whiteman, although B-2s have also advanced based at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, Guam, and England. Each Spirit is named after a U.S. state, starting with Spirit of Missouri. The exception is the Spirit of Kitty Hawk, said to be possessed because it once mysteriously started its engine in the hangar when unmanned. In 2008, the Spirit of Kansas crashed shortly after takeoff in Guam because a humidity sensor that was incorrectly calibrated by a storm caused a fly-by-wire system malfunction. Fortunately, the crew made it out of the most expensive plane crash in history. Like today's F-35s, early production B-2s weren't really full-featured, lacking full payloads, weapons, navigation, and defense systems. Over time, Northrop Grumman stepped up in 2 upgraded models, introducing the terrain-following system, GPS navigation, satellite communications via laptop, instead of very short high-frequency radio messages, and most importantly, integration of smart bombs and cruise missiles. Today, the Air Force continues to invest billions in updating B-2 radar-absorbing materials, fiber optic cables, computer processors, and data links. The B-2s received initial operational capability in 1997 and saw their combat work on March 24, 1999, by starting a NATO bombing campaign that pressured Yugoslavia to stop the ethnic cleansing of Kosovar Albanians. The Missouri-based B-2s flew 50 30-hour sorties across the Atlantic, successfully breaking through Yugoslavia's air defense network to drop about a third of the regulations released in the first 2 months of the campaign. The B-2 was the first aircraft to use the GPS-guided JDAM bomb, which marked a turning point in the air war towards the widespread use of cheaper precision-guided weapons. However, the war also illustrates that higher precision doesn't help if intel fails to distinguish targets properly. A Spirit dropped 5 JDAMs on the Chinese embassy, which was mistakenly identified as an armory by the CIA, killing 3 people and causing serious diplomatic fallout. 2 years later, Spirit is back in action, flying 6 70-hour missions that involve a stopover at Diego Garcia, where a replacement crew is deployed, to detonate that target in Afghanistan, the longest combat strike in history. 2 years later, the B-2 was finally declared full operational capability, with just 6 Spirits striking 92 targets in the opening days of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. The B-2 started another U.S. war in 2011, intervening against the Libyan dictator at the time, destroying most of the Libyan Air Force on the ground at Gartabia Air Base using JDAM. Spirit's most notable latest mission was the attack that led to the 8-5 militants encamped in the Libyan desert on January 19, 2017. Detailed in this excellent article by William Langwish, which shows that billions of dollars worth of bombers were sent to exterminate deficient rebels. Anti-aircraft guns. The Air Force's 20 Spirits remain an intimidating, silver bullet, first strike weapon that can drop heavy conventional or nuclear payloads into command bunkers, air defense radars, or well-defended strategic weapons locations with little advance warning. But B-2s weren't just expensive to build, they cost a lot of money to operate, too, with each hour of flight costing $163,000 per flight hour and 60 hours of maintenance. It used to be closer to $120. Simply maintaining each B-2 costs $41 million a year, and that's at a mission capability rate of around 50% or lower. Furthermore, each Spirit requires a $5 million special air-conditioned hangar to maintain its radar-absorbing coating. And every 7 years, Spirits receives a $60 million overhaul, in which the ram is carefully blasted with crystallized wheat starch and the surface is carefully inspected for dents and minor scratches. Many defense writers have complained about the small number of B-2s procured. However, the B-2 cuts are a bet on the lack of a major power confrontation that the Pentagon might be grateful for today, saving the Air Force from spending the last 25 years paying for dozens of additional stealth bombers that specialize in high flight. Wars of intensity when the United States is involved in Afghanistan and Iraq. Of course, China and Russia have recently emerged as formidable potential adversaries, giving the B-2 a more relevant long-range strategic strike mission. However, the Pentagon bought the stealth, and, ostensibly, more cost-effective B-21 Raider to fulfill that possibility. After all, the B-2's stealth capabilities are no longer up to date, with the newer F-22 and F-35 stealth fighters boasting between 1/10 and 1/100th of the B-2's radar square, measuring 0.1 to 0.05 meters. The B-21 is very similar to Spirit 2.0 and will incorporate a more cost-effective radar-absorbing material incorporated into the fuselage and networked computers for sensor fusion with friendly troops, enabling it to double as a surveillance platform. As the B-2 capability will be fully incorporated by the B-21, the Air Force plans to retire Spirit around 2036 as the Raiders phase. Of course, the B-2 story suggests that the biggest question may be whether the B-21 can stay within budget, and how much Washington is willing to pay when the bill is due.